So let's move on to Ukraine then, Patrick.
Right. So just let's give an update on what's happening here with the conflict in Ukraine. I think you're kicking this one off.
Well, indeed, because I just want to mention Ben Wallace and his comment that Ukraine has tragically become a battle lab. That's a pretty tragic statement in itself, and he seems to be quite proud of that fact. But moving on to the Kerch Bridge, we mentioned this on Monday, a little bit more on this. So this is going back to 2018 because the Kerch Bridge opened in 2018. And at the time, Alan Duncan said this: the opening of the bridge represents yet another violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and a further example of Russia's reckless behavior. This was the rhetoric from the British government in 2018. And the Russians in return said, as for relations between Russia and Great Britain, they're indeed at the worst level probably in history. Well, that was 2018. Things have got even worse since then. But I wanted to remind everybody that back in October last year, the Grayzone published this. This is Kit Klauenberg, exposed before Ukraine blew up Kerch Bridge, British spies plotted it. And what he's saying here is that the secret British intelligence plot to blow up Crimea's Kerch Bridge is revealed in internal documents and correspondence obtained exclusively by the Grayzone. So they're talking about, they're saying, Kit's saying the Kerch Bridge was attacked on October the 8th, suicide bombing apparently overseen by Ukraine's SBU intelligence services. He goes on to say this: detailed proposals for providing audacious support to Kiev's maritime raiding operations were drafted at the request of Chris Donnelly. Now, Chris Donnelly, he describes as a senior British Army intelligence operative and a veteran high-ranking NATO advisor. That is absolutely correct. But of course, he's more famous in recent years for being in charge of the Integrity Initiative, Russia propaganda machine. The wide-ranging plan's core component was the destruction of the bridge over the Kerch Strait. And he provides a couple of the slides from Chris Donnelly's presentation. I'm not going to go into the details of that now. You can have a look at that on the article. But this comes up to date now with a couple of days ago. Another article from Kit on the Grayzone: leaked files suggest hidden British hand in latest Kerch Bridge strike. And he's saying this time the SBU appears to have used unmanned submarines to target the Kerch Bridge with explosives. A review of leaked files previously revealed by the Grayzone provides some solid basis for again blaming Donnelly's cabal. So he highlights one organization here, Prevail Partners, as the cutout enlisted to train a secret Ukrainian partisan army to target Russian territory with terror attacks. Prevail pledged to provide, he alleges, the SBU with extensive targeted expertise and technology for operations targeting Crimea. So this is the Prevail Partners website, a British risk management company. That's how they describe themselves, harnessing operational expertise from our world-class team, providing operational support, intelligence services, and leading capabilities, and supporting clients to deliver positive impacts. Well, was this a positive impact on the Kerch Bridge? It depends on your point of view, I suppose. The Grayzone article goes on to say, from the perspective of Donnelly's intelligence cabal, the Odesa branch of the Ukrainian SBU was perfectly positioned to wreak havoc on Crimea. Located just over the Black Sea and filled with hardcore Maidan operatives, the unit signed a technical support agreement with Prevail and Thomas and Winslow, a self-described crisis management company. So let's look at their website. This is what it looks like. There's nothing much else there, but I do note that in the bottom paragraph there, it says, in addition to our work in Afghanistan, Thomas and Winslow is also establishing operations in Ukraine. The ongoing crisis in the region, which has been precipitated by Russia's aggression, has created a need for versatile and reliable support for the Ukrainian government, people, and industries.
Okay. It looks a bit glowy, that website, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then finally, coming back to the Grayzone, again, as part of the assessment by Prevail, representatives of the British company and TIW confidentially met in person with Odesa's SBU's deputy director. This summit focused heavily on targeting and specialist capability to support that function. Prevail and TIW felt they could add huge benefit to the SBU's existing human intelligence and electronic data capture capabilities, and so on. So again, the Grayzone, using leaked documents, are making some significant allegations, and I do recommend people go and read those.
And on top of this, Scott Ritter, in a recent interview, I don't have it to hand, but it's on YouTube, one of his recent interviews, he basically is blaming the British for this latest attack with the unmanned underwater drones. And he's basically saying they're the only country that really has that tech. The Ukraine couldn't possibly deploy it and use it with any degree of skill and accuracy like the British could. And so he's placing the blame squarely on the UK.
Yes.
For that, and like the specialist diving teams like the DTXG and so forth. So listen, pedigree, form, capability, it's not really in the profile of the Ukrainian armed forces on this.
But in the meantime, the allegation is that in response and retaliation for this attack on the Kerch Bridge, the Russians are attacking the grain stores in Odessa.
So if it was the Ukrainians or the British or them together or NATO or whatever, what is the motive for this attack? Was it just to, terrorize the Russians? No, it was there's a bigger motive at play. So Russia has basically launched immediately in retaliation massive strikes on Odessa, hitting all sorts of port assets and so forth. We've also seen reports on Russian Telegram of NATO specialists evacuating from Odessa at this time as well. So as a result, Russia is imposing security restrictions on the Black Sea humanitarian corridor. Now we're getting down to the plot here. So who benefits this situation? Well, it basically brings the so-called grain deal to a screeching halt, for starters. And there's a number of other details beneath this that show that it looks to me like this was an act to cause a reaction by Russia, and to perhaps create a narrative in the global community that there's a global food crisis, and this is Russia's fault, and people are going to starve in Africa because of Putin's hitting Odessa. Of course, not talking at all about what triggered this. So from Russia's point of view, this was a security red line. They have always responded proportionately in kind, or maybe a little bit harder than when they were hit. So they always wait. Then there's the counterstrike. Russia's very predictable in that sense. It's always a response like for like. So, and we go on here. So, and this is another reason why banning RT in the UK and Europe might not be a great idea, because you might miss stories like this. Kiev threatens to sink civilian ships bound for Russia. Okay, so this is the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense warns that on July 21st, all vessels heading in the waters of the Black Sea in the direction of seaports of the Russian Federation may be considered by Ukraine to be carrying military cargo with all associated risks. Okay, now the amount of traffic in the Black Sea right now to Russian ports is immense. So what exactly are they saying here? Is this a potential crisis? If a statement like this internationally? Think about that for a moment. There's Russian grain coming out of Russian ports to the world.
Right.
Much more Russian grain, in fact. So here we go. On the grain story here of, again, 5 EU nations are pushing to extend the ban. So these are the countries in Europe. They don't want Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria. They don't want the Ukrainian grain because they say it's distorting the markets. So what's happened with all this grain? That 70%, it was all supposed to go to the starving poor of the global south. 70% of it has gone to, quote, rich countries, this Ukrainian grain, and only 3% has gone to Somalia, Yemen, Sudan, all of these so-called poor countries in the global south, only 3%. But as anyone would know when they're looking at any of the league tables on these, Russia supplies 20% of the global grain supply. And Ukraine is only around 5%. So this is worth about $6 billion a year, $500 million a month to Ukraine. So there's some money they make from it, but it's being resold for profit in Europe. So it's not doing what it's intended to do. And it appears that the West have tried to derail this so-called deal at every turn anyway. And this latest attack on the Kerch Bridge seems to be more of the same. So what exactly is going on here? I think this is done by design. Oh, the other thing is they agreed to connect Russia to the SWIFT system and to end sanctions on the Russian Agricultural Bank and retract sanctions on insurance for shipping. Very important. That was part of the grain deal, and it was never implemented by the West. So Russia's pulling out, and they're being blamed as basically sabotaging the grain deal now. So you can see this is a war of propaganda. This is a war of words, and the facts speak for themselves. on this. It's pretty clear.
Right. So where does that take us then?
Well, this is just another caveat to this: toxic contamination found in Ukrainian grain on pesticide ban. In some countries, these are banned pesticide chemicals. So again, the market for the Ukrainian grain is questionable at that. So what's going to break the impasse here is we're going to need a European leader or a U.S. leader to come in and break this impasse, because this conflict does not look like it's going to have a negotiated settlement. Both sides, well, especially the NATO-Ukrainian side, Mike, is saying that we can't have a negotiated settlement until we get every bit of Ukrainian territory back to 1991 borders. That's clearly never going to happen, okay? So that means there's going to be no negotiations. So to keep pumping weapons in, as long as the so-called Ukrainians want to fight, okay? So what's it going to take? This is the first potential high-profile European leader to come out is Marine Le Pen. This is Le Figaro here on screen. Oh, sorry, we've go there. And this is what she said. She said, I do not understand that Emmanuel Macron is not fully focused on the organization of a conference for peace to put an end to the war. This is what she's come out and said publicly. This is the first time she's made such a statement like this. Now, Emmanuel Macron still has time in office, but this is, I think, significant because it's the first significant European national leader to come out here and basically take a position on this, that no, this war just can't be an open-ended conflict.
Yeah.
So this is, I think, important.
Okay, cool.